In the Gospel of John, Jesus takes all sorts of radical actions. He heals the sick on the Sabbath, he gives sight to a blind man, and he even raises a dead man back to life. As he's doing all this, his popularity with the Jewish peers starts to grow, and this was concerning to the Pharisees and other religious leaders at the time. Turns out, the dead man back to life was the last straw. The leaders thought that Jesus was going to get the attention of the Roman Empire, which could jeopardize the whole tenuous system they had built that kept them on top and in power. So they started plotting to get rid of this problem person, Jesus. Jesus heard about the plan, so he did the wise thing and stayed out of the public eye for a while. He was in a small town, Bethany, for dinner on his way to Jerusalem for the Passover. Today's text tells us about this dinner at the house of Lazarus, Martha, and Mary, right before he goes into Jerusalem for the big Jewish holiday. And I invite you to imagine the scene as I read from the Gospel of John, chapter 12, verses 1 through 8. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, the home of Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. There they gave a dinner for him. Martha served, and Lazarus was one of those at the table with him. Mary took a pound of costly perfume made of pure nard, anointed Jesus' feet, and wiped them with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples, the one who was about to betray him, said, "Why was this perfume not sold for 300 denarii and the money given to the poor?" He said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. He kept the common purse and used to steal what was put into it. Jesus said, "Leave her alone. She bought it so that she might keep it for the day of my burial. You always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me." The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Mary was fully immersed in that moment. While pouring the perfume on Jesus' feet, she was remembering all his precious words that had spoken to her heart. And she was wondering if this perfume could ever be as good as his embodied wisdom and love. She was thinking back about the time when Jesus wept along with her, grieving the loss of Lazarus together. She could also vividly remember the moment when Jesus cried out, "Lazarus, come out!" And he did. Wrapped in layers of cloth from head to toe, and how she had to unbind him, his stenchy body. It felt as if the stench never left her nostrils or the house. This made her wrinkle her nose. While gently wiping Jesus' feet, Mary recalled the widespread rumor about the Pharisees' plot to kill him. And she wondered whether Jesus raising her brother was the direct cause of it, and if this would be her last time to be with him. In sadness, grief, and guilt, she continued to wipe his feet with her hair with the utmost sincerity. After a while, Mary took a deep breath and breathed in the fragrance that now filled the house. The stench was gone. That reminded her of the resurrection of life, which Jesus was always talking about. The fragrance filled her memories with Jesus until she heard these words. Why was this perfume not sold for 300 denarii and the money given to the poor? That question ruined the moment. She froze. She didn't know how to respond to this. Was that even a question or a flat-out rejection of her action? She was daunted. She was trying to figure out what's going on. Is he saying that our beloved teacher and Savior is not worth receiving an extraordinary gift with an expensive price tag on it? Is he denouncing my choice of using a year's worth of income? Or is he rejecting the idea of pouring this expensive perfume on the feet of a man who had a target on his back? Maybe it was all of the above. Judas Iscariot was pretty good at math. He was a practical man who was great at calculating the return on investment value. For quite a while, he had invested his time with Jesus. The miracles and healings must have meant that Jesus would be a great leader of the nation someday. He was someone worth staying close by. Judas ran the numbers, and he saw a great ROI value in this miracle worker from Galilee. He was sure that Jesus would rise as a new political leader who would overthrow the colonial oppressive power of Rome and rebuild the Jewish nation. And Judas was positioning himself for an appointment of power and status in this new administration that was sure was coming with Jesus. One day, he learned the rumor too about the Pharisees' plan to kill Jesus. That was a red flag. He saw his hopes of political advancement drying up quickly. Being a numbers guy, he began to withdraw his investment and refused any else into this guy. Pouring the costly perfume with an expensive price tag on a person who is facing a nearly certain death sentence? That doesn't add up in his political arithmetic. He wanted to keep the money instead. Although the Gospel of John tells us that Judas Iscariot was a thief who was about to betray Jesus, I think Judas was just a practical man and a wise investor. Jesus knew this. He knew that the world was full of people like Judas who'd care more about their personal advancement and profit than God's kingdom. It's so easy when we see others to notice only their power and positions or some promising qualities that they have. We like to hang around others who are just like us and who make us comfortable and offer something to us. But Jesus doesn't. He goes to places where others are hesitant to go and do what others aren't comfortable with. He often hung out with people who seemed to have no hope. He gained popularity among the commoners. This made the religious leaders and the high officials uncomfortable. When everyone was focused on making it to the top, he came down. Jesus went in the opposite direction, welcoming all the uncomfortable situations he could get. He went to the temple and he was not afraid to challenge the business as usual. He traveled through Samaria and met an outcast woman. He risked his reputation by healing the sick on the Sabbath. He spoke up to protect a woman caught in adultery. No wonder why then he was rejected by many and was plotted to be killed. He gave sight to a blind man. Indeed, Jesus gives sight to all of us when our vision is so often obstructed by power and positions that we see first in others. He brings a new way of seeing that is beyond the external value of others. He sees what's inside and invites us to do the same. And that's why so many people followed Jesus. Because he saw them and knew them and loved them right where they were. Mary and Judas followed Jesus. But when faced with the burden of following Jesus, Mary still saw the light and kept following. Judas didn't. He walked away. It was too much for him. Mary chose to risk rejection out of her love for Jesus, and Judas chose to reject it. We idealize Mary's faithful discipleship while denouncing Judas' unfaithfulness. We are sour about Judas, this guy. You know what our irony is, though? The truth is, we are immersed in Judas' culture while striving to follow in the footsteps of Jesus and Mary. Mary followed Jesus and his call to love against the arithmetic that says it's not a good investment to love the unlovely. We may not like Judas Iscariot, but the truth is, we often make choices like he did and act just like him. Let's be honest. When we see others, we tend to see the car they drive that catches our attention. We see that business card, that sleek resume, or even their work email address. And the truth is, if we are honest, these things impress us. We are trained to make a good first impression, and it is their external values and their usefulness that catches our attention first. Likewise, we take in pride in what we can do with our education, profession, or leadership positions. And our ego gets hurt when we lose a portion of our roles, privileges, power, and sometimes our paycheck. Myself included. I'm pretty sure I will struggle with my ego when I lose some of those. When my renewal application for driver's license is rejected, I will struggle with my self-value. If we look at Judas in this different and honest light, we see that he was following what's promising on the surface with Jesus, his qualifications for political leadership and the privileges, powers, and profits that come with it. Judas missed the whole point Jesus was making because he only saw the external value of his teacher. He couldn't see past the surface. Unlike Judas, Jesus didn't care about ROI. Jesus didn't pursue popularity or political advancement. He didn't strive for a sense of accomplishment. He didn't make priorities on marketing strategies to keep the temple business going. Jesus refused to go with the flow, not for the sake of being against the mainstream, but because he was fully grounded in God's love for all. He stirred up the cultural and social norms and shook up their religious law for the sake of that divine love, because he truly believed in what God was doing in him, through him, and with him. Jesus risked rejection, numerous rejections, until the deadliest rejection of all on the cross, because it was a call from God, a call to love everyone, a call to love everywhere. And he modeled a fearless life for his disciples like Mary. Mary followed Jesus in every possible way. She poured out the costly perfume on Jesus' feet right before he was put to death, despite criticism from the movement accountants. She knew that Jesus saw her heart, and she was right, Jesus did. And he appreciated and valued her deep love for him that didn't make sense to anyone else. Mary's heart was brightened when Jesus spoke up in her defense. Leave her alone. She bought it so that she might keep it for the day of my burial. You always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me. Whew. Mary sighed. She sighed deeply with a relief, knowing that her act of love and discipleship was truly embraced by Jesus. And from his deep understanding and affirmation, she learned another lesson from her teacher: speaking up on behalf of others who are being criticized and rejected by the mainstream. Mary found peace and comfort in the presence of Jesus, the one who is also rejected by many, but found courage and strength in God nevertheless. It's challenging for us to live in a Judas-like culture and still follow in the footsteps of Mary, a faithful disciple of Jesus. Added to that challenge is our culture of rejection. We hear numerous no's throughout our life, loud and clear. We also experience quiet rejections, often expressed in a quiet, disapproving look, in a raised eyebrow, in awkward silence, or in a delayed answer. Rejections are implied in our clueless curiosity. They can be expressed in well-intentioned comments like, "I wish you were ... or even a question like Judas. These bring us feelings of discouragement, sadness, grief, guilt, and shame. Rejection in any form and at any age hurts our ego too. They are painful. So we often withhold ourselves from asking, challenging, or taking action boldly when we need to. But you know what? Jesus came to comfort the afflicted and to afflict the comfortable. If we are not uncomfortable, that means we stopped growing. That means we are done changing. That means we are not following and journeying with Jesus all the way. If we do not experience serious rejections as Jesus did, as Mary did, or if we do not speak up on behalf of others who are being rejected right before our eyes, like Jesus did, there is something missing in our discipleship. If we are too comfortable in our worship and with people we are in fellowship, there is something seriously missing in our faith community. Let me ask us this question for us to seriously think about and pray on. How comfortable are you? How comfortable are we?